This is bigger than sport, although the AFL is at the heart of it. The details are not fully at hand yet. They will be announced at 10 o'clock in the media-managed way of the state government. But as reported in the Herald Sun, obviously provided by the government, this deal includes a $225 million for the Docklands Stadium, which has to be renamed, and the area needs it. Certainly needs it down that way. An upgrade of the Great Southern Stand, the MCG. The grand final stays 40 years. New hotel down around Etihad Stadium to host the Brownlow. $240 million for suburban and regional grounds. It looks good, but we don't know over what period of time, how much the taxpayer money is, what the deal is. The opposition's made it clear previously, no money for the AFL, no money for Etihad. In fact, Matthew Guy said he'll take every dollar Daniel Andrews gives to Etihad Stadium and spend it on local sports grounds, including female change rooms. In the studio with me, Chief Executive of the AFL, Gil McLachlan. Good morning.
Hey Neil, how you doing?
Have you won Tats Lotto?
No, I don't know who won Tats Lotto, but the Andrews government's done a great deal for Victorians, I think, and for all football people. And there's a balance here. It supports community football, grassroots football, supports women's football. It supports elite football, our 10 Victorian clubs particularly, and then all of our clubs beyond that in terms of two great facility upgrades in Victoria for what is a $3 billion part of the economy.
So what is the deal? What do you put in?
We are committed to upgrading Etihad, and we will use...
And you'll pay for that?
Well, there's a $225 million grant from the government to do that, but we then committed to being an asset for all sport and for all entertainment Victoria for a minimum of 30 years.
So you play other sport at Etihad?
We're committed to that. So it's going to be a multi-purpose venue. Soccer, rugby, concerts, everything.
You already do that.
But the point about that, Neil, is about we've bought that, we've paid for it. These things are billion-dollar assets. So for $225 million, the Andrews government gets a unbelievably cheap first-class roof stadium. So it's
actually they've already got it.
No, because it needs an upgrade and you need to work through all that.
So what will it involve? Upgrading the stadium. What about around the stadium?
So that we think is going to be an incredibly exciting part of the Docklands redevelopment. So we're looking to redevelop our offices, then open up the stadium down to the water. We'll also open up on the eastern side back to the city and on the southern side. The stadium was built, Neil, when stadiums were built for sort of looking inwards for 60 or 50 or whatever many events a year. They're a billion-dollar piece of infrastructure. This is now in the middle of the city, and this should be using 365 days a year, so people can come down there, use it, whether it's rock climbing or for conferences or for restaurants, and open up that water, which I think, and having lived down there in a working sense for a long time, is a underutilised part of Melbourne and needs to be opened up.
So the government's putting in $225 million into that. Is the AFL putting any money into it?
Yeah, we will. We're committed to that. We've already, we've put money in by buying it, and we'll work through all the plans on that. But this is going to be a big development, and the final view, Neil, will depend on what actually the final plans look like, how we open up to the water, and how that plays out. But it'll be a significant amount of money.
But the deal isn't that the government puts in $225 million and you put in a certain amount. No such deal. All right. What about the MCG? What are they doing there?
So this extending their deal by 20 years gives them the ability to plan their cash flows and redevelop their ground for Victorians and for all sport lovers who come to this town and for all football fans. So, and part of that it gives is that they then are going to increase the club distributions from next year, and I think that secures the future of those tenant clubs there. So the clubs make more money out of there to secure their future.
Do they get more money because of the increased size of the stadium, or why do they get more money?
Because the part of the trade-off is for the extra security the MCG get, that they actually give a bigger share of the pie to the clubs.
How much?
Somewhere between $9 and $10 million in 2019.
What each?
Across the 4 or 5 clubs we're playing there.
In next year?
Yep.
And does that go up?
It escalates on CPI right through the length of the deal.
So the clubs that play there will get an extra $9 or $10 million between them next year?
That's right.
And the government provides that?
No, that's just coming out of the Metro returns over the venue.
Okay. The hotel down at the Etihad Stadium, who pays for that?
That would be paid for by us as a part of the development. Now, whether it's a hotel or what it looks like, that's part of it. I mean, that was part of the initial planning we presented to presidents and others. But and that seems to be one of the great uses. But it's symbolic to say we're going to develop and open up that waterfront of that part of the city and make it, hopefully an exciting precinct.
But when you say us, that comes out of the 225 million.
No, that comes out of us redeveloping that site and partnering with whoever is appropriate if the numbers work.
Oh, I see. So
the 225 goes directly into the public amenity of the stadium.
Okay. What other parts of it that appeal to?
I think the investment in community sport and women's sport. So, we've got this extraordinary growth in women's football, and we need to invest in community change rooms, facilities, and then we also need to, at the AFLW level, we need venues to play those games. And so there's significant investment across the board from the government in those areas, and that's great for our game at the community and at the women's level.
Okay, so how will you work out where the money goes to regional and suburban grounds?
So there's a process worked through, and we'll tip money in there too. We've committed an amount of money to partner with the government on that. And
how much?
We're in for $13 million.
And what are they putting in? 240 odd.
Yeah.
Is that an extra 240?
There's funds that add up to about 150, I think, and then there's another 120 on top of that that are going to specific projects already outlined.
And 13 million of that's from you.
Yep.
Okay. The government's been edgy about poker machines in AFL. Are there any deals on poker machines as part of this?
No, there's not.
And what is the deal, essentially, from you? What have you agreed to?
With respect to poker machines?
No, with the whole deal from the government. I mean, they're coming here and they are saying, here's Tats Lotto. We're going to help you. We're going to spend all this money. What do you do in return?
We've committed to, clearly, an additional 20 years of our games at the MCG. And we've committed to partnering with them on a whole series of community programs across the board. We've invested, our stadium needs to be an asset for Victorians for the next 30 years at a minimum. We've committed to work with the government on the rebuild of Etihad Stadium. So we've made long-term commitments to invest in sport and specifically in football at the community level. And we've made long-term commitments about what we're doing at the elite level so that this $3 billion industry continues to be a big part of the Victorian economy. So it's a long-term partnership with our venues, with the government for our football across the community, the women's level and across the elite.
Have you agreed to keep the grand final at the MCG for 40 more years?
No, for 20 more years.
20 more years.
Yeah.
And Brownlow, what's the agreement on that?
10 years.
Where? Down at the new hotel?
No, at Crown.
10 years more at Crown?
Well, 10 years in Victoria, but Crown's been a great partner.
Okay. Well, because that was in danger of moving, the Brownlow, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Grand final ever in threat?
We clearly looked at it, Neil, and we took it seriously. It's just something we need to be planning at least a year and a half, 2 years out, such as the scale of the event. And when you do that, you can't have then the team that finishes top getting the grand final. You don't know who's going to finish in the grand final. So then when you've made that decision, it's, this is an incredibly iconic asset. We're lucky to have the MCG and to be able to get 100,000 people in it. And that's where we've landed, is that we want as many people as we can go to the grand final. It's an extraordinary venue that's an asset for our game, and we're committed to it long term.
How long have you been working on this deal with the government?
Oh, a long time. Yeah, I guess years, yeah.
And when did it start in your time or Andrew Demetriou's time?
Around that time, I don't know, but it's been a while.
Fair enough. And when was it finally done? I mean, I read you had a hookup of presidents last night. Is that right? Yeah,
we're still finalising. I mean, we've got an agreement with the government. There's a meeting this morning of the MCG Trust, I think, to confirm it and affirm it. But it feels, it was working late into the evening, and the things come to head in the last, clearly, days.
You've made at least 50 million surplus last year. You don't pay tax. I mean, this is a debate running in Sydney around NRL. Big profits, no tax. Why should government be putting money into AFL?
Well, first of all, in terms of the profits last year, Neil, a lot of that's just the book value on the stadium. Why? Because we're a not-for-profit that actually reinvests across the community. All the money goes back to people, and there's an acknowledgement that we have a huge impact across the community. We have an impact in local communities. Every dollar of turnover in a footy club gets about $5 in social benefit. We're a $3 billion industry for this state alone, and it's about $6 billion across the country. And we're actually an employer. We have huge health and wellbeing impacts, and we do our bit. And all the money that our clubs and us make go back into the community, and we are actually part of the fabric of our society, and that's acknowledged, and I think we do our bit.
Did the presidents vote on it last night?
No, they didn't vote. What they do is, we don't work like that. We keep our clubs informed. They're part of the independent commissions. They make decisions on behalf of the industry, but we do it in the way that people are kept informed and included to the appropriate level.
So you put it all together, how much is it worth?
I think it's a really good deal for footy.
But is it $1 billion? What's it worth?
It depends how you calculate that. I'm not trying to think there's an injection across community and elite of the government of over 500 million, and then there's obviously impacts through the MCG into our clubs and others. So it's a significant deal for football.
Over what period of time?
It depends again. So there's the original deal around till 2037, and there's the extension. But there's commitments here that go over 40 years. There's commitments that go over 5 years. But it's a long-term deal.
But when will we see the redevelopment of the stadium?
We'll start planning on that straight away. I mean, so there is broad plans now, but now we get on with there's a project group that works with government and with the AFL to deliver what football fans, Victorians, Australians want out of the venue, and that hopefully, is a 3 to 4 year project before it's completed.
Oh, really? So, what is it? You could see it 2022 or thereabouts.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a bit feeling around, but let's say you really have final plans in a year, and you start turning dirt 6 months after that, and it's probably a 3 year project.
Okay. You said the MCG Trust is going through it today. That's a bit surprising. It's been announced before they've approved it.
There's things come to a head in different ways, Neil. There's we know where each other stand, and I think there's some formalities as opposed to actual issues.
Premier's announcing details at 10, but I think we've covered most of it. Does this mean the idea of a third stadium's gone?
For Melbourne? Yeah, I think it does. I think that it feels...
You told Eddie?
It's across it. I mean, Simmons or GmbH is a great stadium now for Geelong, and we have two first-class stadium that services a really growing city in a great way. We've got a 50,000 seat stadium with a roof that does those games and concerts and others well, and then we've got this iconic as the MCG, and this is a plan to redevelop them both, and I think it's great, not just for Victorians, but for everyone who comes to this town and enjoys such an important part of the culture of this town, which is sports, live sports and major events.
I go back to Chief Executive to Jack Hamilton, the late Jack Hamilton, and dealing with him, and then Ross Oakley and you, Andrew, Wayne. Most at some stage complained that government didn't put any money in. Is this the first time that the AFL has had significant money from government? Yeah,
in Victoria, yes. And what it is, it's acknowledgement too. The other thing I'd say, Neil, is that it's an acknowledgement of we're doing our bit. I think they've got an incredible deal because for $225 they get basically billions of dollars worth of outcomes. It's a great deal. I think it works for everyone, and it helps us. These sorts of deals actually help us keep the footy affordable. Now, people have their views on all that, but
keep prices down?
Yeah, I mean, we're still $5 for kids, free on Sundays, $25 minimum ticket across adults. Now, people will talk about the margins, but that, us being a mass product and being affordable, all these deals make sense in that context too.
So, is there any commitment on prices to the government?
Not a specific commitment, other than I'm committed to our supporters to make our game affordable, and I think we've seen that over the last 4 years.
About a month ago, Matthew Guy, the opposition leader, says for every dollar Daniel Andrews commits to the AFL to spend on Etihad Stadium, I'll take it and give it to local sports ground upgrades.
Yeah, well, I can't comment on that other than to say we've entered a partnership with the Andrews government that I reckon serves this community well and our game well. I make a decision on behalf of that. It's a long-term deal. We're going to win at the community level. Women's sport will win, and our, all the people who love sport and major events in this country are going to come to venues now. They're going to be first class, and it'll continue to drive the economy locally.
Sounds like vote one Andrews.
I'm not saying that. I represent the AFL, and I certainly feel I represent a lot of parts of the community, and I reckon this is a good deal.
Clubs that aren't tenants of the MCG, do they get anything out of it?
Yes, because we have committed through this to recut all of the tenancy deals that Etihad. So as much as the clubs are playing the MCG are winning, so will the clubs at Etihad.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming
How's your tractor going?
Terrific. What about the LED signs? Will we fix them?
Yes.
As part of this deal?
Sorry, the one in Perth?
Well, yeah, bloke's cutting his hand running into it.
It's just not good enough. We're sorting that out, and whether it's covered screens or whatever, unless it's safe for our players to play, we'll pull them down if we need to, but that'll be fixed. It's just not good enough.
Okay, and biting?
Yeah.
You were known as a bit of a mongrel on a footy field.
No,
you would
I
never,
was not.
Yes, you were. Well, you
No,
never
no,
would have done
I was
that.
verbally. I have conceded to you that I had too much to say. I don't think I was biting anyone. I don't think many people were scared of me, but yeah, we all have our quirks.
Thank you again. Just finally, does this change attitudes, or does this continue the commitment to 18 teams? Does this affect the 18 teams?
I think it reaffirms our commitment to 18 teams, and I think that every supporter of whether it's the Bulldogs or St Kilda Roars looks at this as you go recut deals across both venues. It says, I might not be happy with where our team is and where they're at the moment, but I know they're around for the long term.
Thank you very much for your time.